All right. Cool. It's okay. I've never been on live stream, but I fucking have so many things to say. So I did pretty decently. I tied for second for both. Yeah, yeah. Barry is a force to reckon with. hmm Uh huh. hmm I think like the biggest shakeups are definitely probably going to be like the earlier cups. So Boulder, since it kind of came out, it was like the inaugural cup for like the season. And I mean, the biggest thing is the fact that with like unique picks, it's going to kind of change up sort of the whole sort of like double scar, double meta champ sort of for like the season. The other things that kind of contribute to it is the advent of power up punch. I think that's kind of like just changed a lot, and the fact that steel it has gotten a lot of like new picks since then with like which we've seen like starting with Kingdom actually with Bastiota, and the fact that with the release of like sort of like Gen 4 and like GoFest, you also have like the trash form of Wormadam and also Jirachi that's kind of like out there too. It's going to kind of throw some curveballs out there. Mhm. Yeah, yeah, and as you kind of brought up, like it's like also kind of a reflection of just up the like the it went up to Nightmare, was it? Or no, no, it cut off at Kingdom. It cut off at Kingdom. Yeah, it cut off at Kingdom. So it's like Boulder. It's Boulder to kind of like Kingdom. The kind of the reason why I think it'd be like a popular pick is the fact that it's like a meta that only a few people got the chance to play in, and I think it was like really interesting with sort of like the restricted picks that are there. We ended up seeing a lot of interesting strategies as we sort of saw with both the North American Championship, Lina Own kind of coming out with like kind of like Shadow Claw, like shaking up things, and also like as we saw in the European Championships, Raging Taz and like Ludicolo, and how that kind of changed things. hmm 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 I think regionals will definitely kind of like be one of the popular ones, and I guess it also kind of depends on each like the communities, like in the areas, like like here in the Bay Area, we have a lot of small little kind of communities that hold multiple kind of cups, and I think like in those sort of like areas when you have these like multiple cups that are like kind of like smaller, it's a great place where you can kind of have like sort of variety, and I think that some of the community hosts are already talking about like what can kind of be done to kind of have diverse things, whereas I can imagine in like sort of other areas like like you look at South America, they have that giant cup that's like there, right? Maybe like they might be kind of more focused on sort of like having something that's sort of more different in like regionals or whatnot, just because of the fact that they're hosting only one cup. It's like a gigantic cup. I think it actually makes it kind of interesting in terms of like their participation and also what they kind of like want to wait. Just because looking at some of the folks here, like like I just kind of finished my fourth jungle cup, and that's just jungle, right? I'm just kind of doing that, and now that we have like different communities doing different cups, I could see in one way it's like, oh look, like if folks are only kind of interested in doing one cup per month because they think it's stale. There might be the fact that there's a diverse cup may encourage people to kind of participate in multiple ones. And I think in like kind of like the communities where there are multiple ones, people are already doing at least like one or two on average. Whereas yeah, I can also still see like on the flip side, like the folk who kind of started PvP later, they have less resources, so that they might be deterred from certain cups because they just they don't want to, as you're saying, power up something just not to kind of be like only to be used like kind of like once. Mhm. 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 Uh-huh, uh-huh, uh-huh. But yeah, I think like to be able to have some diversity, like the fact that they're including sort of regional formats. It one thing I was thinking about is that you almost can kind of have like a if you had a community where like they pretty much hosted every single one throughout sort of the month, you can kind of like relive sort of like the original games where you're going to like eight different like sort of cities and kind of like fighting your way sort of through there and kind of like really like be able to showcase that sort of the diversity of the different metas that are there, and just like experience like kind of like the different changes that have kind of come about all of them. Um, yeah, I think that's kind of going to be something that's going to be really exciting and goes towards just maybe making people want to kind of go and travel and do more cups. I think I would trend towards like this might be like the month where people might be like, oh, let me go and try to do like another one because there's just so much kind of like difference and such. Oh, really? Okay. Oh, for sure, for sure. Okay, okay. Yeah, I would have thought it would be the reverse that they could hear you because you're kind of like the host, like streaming kind of like this.
Okay. I'm gonna test it again. See if you can hear me. Let me know if you guys can hear me in the stream.
Well, I can still at least hear you.
Yeah. Okay. So people should be able to hear me now. Which is good. All right. So, uh, pretty much. Hey, sorry about that, everyone. Yeah, I haven't streamed since like 6 months ago. So, anyways, I'm here with Alan, and we're just kind of discussing the bulk of this mirror and how things have changed and how different communities are going to be hosting their own mirror cups. And so you were saying about how communities are going to be creating or hosting each cup and what participation is going to be like. So can you kind of go over that again?
Yeah, and I think it's going to kind of like depend on sort of like how each of the communities are. So, here in sort of the Bay Area, there are like a lot of small little communities that kind of host like a lot of cups, and that's going to be like very conducive towards like a massive coordination effort where like folks can actually kind of each of the communities can sort of host a different cup because on average, each community hosts about 2 cups, and we have about like 5 or 6. So there's a lot of opportunity to be able to cover everything. Whereas you can contrast that to something like say like in South America where you have like in Santiago and Chile they have like just one like massive sort of cup, and for those, they might go towards something that's a little more like unique and different, such as like sort of the regionals format, which not everyone got to participate in, or older formats that have like kind of been most privy to change, such as like Boulder and Twilight. I think it's going to be all at the end kind of driven by how the community is kind of like.
Yeah, I definitely see that in the so I think this actually gives an opportunity for some of the smaller communities to get larger attendance to their tournaments. So, for example, one of the probably the largest communities in the Bay Area to hold tournaments are either San Francisco or San Jose, right? Those
Mm-hmm.
were the largest tournaments in terms of the Jungle Cup. Now, there's like smaller communities out in like Diablo Valley and
Mm-hmm.
even like Fairfield and even the North Bay have much
Yeah,
smaller
like there's
tournament.
Antioch, La Marinda, Hercules, and Benicia, the
Mm,
Tri Valley. Like those
yeah,
are all kind of small things, and I think that like we were able to see all of them through both our own SF regionals and also sort of like in the kind of these bigger cups where people kind of like came up. And I think that as we're having these bigger cups and trying to like go towards like bigger cups, we're able to
mm,
kind of have all the community kind of like across the area talk with one another, and I think it's going to lead to like a pretty cool like coordinated effort at least to attempt to try to come to like something that's like different or diverse.
yeah. I think so. I mean, we could talk about coordination and stuff, but honestly, that's not that interesting, right? It's just cool
Sure.
to. It's kind of cool to just think about how this is affecting Pokemon Go as a
Mm-hmm.
community, and I think ever since Pokemon, for me personally, Pokemon Go PvP has changed the landscape of Pokemon Go for me. It now is the main reason I play Pokemon Go, not rather
Yeah.
than like
Uh-huh.
raiding and farming
Yeah.
Stardust and finding shinies. I'm now farming Stardust to power up the Pokemon for the next
Mm-hmm.
cup. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Going to raids to get the resources I need to get the Pokemon. Everything's for PvP now,
Mm-hmm.
and I think Mirror Cup is it's kind of cool that they named it Mirror Cup. Like I kind of tweeted this out already, but it's like a reflection of everything that's happened this past 8 months or so, and ah man, Pokemon Go PvP has really changed the community. For me, like I've only been in Oakland, Berkeley, and El Cerrito, but ever since Pokemon Go PvP, I've gone South Bay, I've gone to
Mm-hmm.
San Francisco, I've gone to Tri Valley. I've met so many people outside of the normal communities that I participate in, and I think that's really cool.
Yeah, no, for sure. Like, like I've also kind of like traveled out of my way. At first, it was like, to like kind of like go like find like Pokemon and spin Pokestops. But now, like with all these different tournaments, like meeting different people, I've also kind of traveled far out north to kind of like Fairfield and as far as like Sacramento and like Roseville. Shout out to any Thomas folks who are kind of like listening because they're the ones who I kind of like sometimes like scrim with, and there's like a
Mhm.
good community out there.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, one
Um,
thing that I just realized that about also what's different. So not only is it the Boulder and the Twilight with the different shifts and sort of meta, but the incoming changes with like Shadow and Purified Pokemon, and also like the charge move kind of like mini game change up. I think that also has the opportunity to kind of like even take something that hasn't really changed and flip those around, because we have like the notions of how like the tie breaks and CMP and all that stuff is going, and
mhm.
with the shifts and like that, I can see how that may change so the results in that, and also just like kind of what we've learned with like under tapping and just piggybacking as well.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot to take in. Yeah, there's a lot of new stuff that's happened since the beginning of Pokemon Go PvP, and I think it's kind of crazy to think about the evolution of the community. I don't know. Maybe I'm just repeating what I'm saying. It's kind of crazy that it's the end of the first season. So
Yeah.
I guess because it's the end of the first season, I wanted to kind of discuss like um, how you feel about next season, right? So do you think they're going to reset all the rankings, or do you think the rankings going to stay? Like, how do you think everything's going to be reset for season two?
Yeah, so from kind of what I remember reading from the rules, I think that they're probably definitely going to reset the rankings, because I remember that what they said was for at the end of the season one, they were going to take kind of like where the best you ever were as a part of that, and use that as kind of like locking in where you are. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you just kind of make analogies to sort of like other kind of like video games, like like Diablo or whatnot,
Mm-hmm.
or World of Warcraft. Well, at the end of the season, right, and if you kind of like have seasonal play, like everything resets, you're back at like kind of
Yeah.
square one. And I think that kind of absolutely sort of makes sense, because that'll give folks who maybe some people who didn't want to go into PvP but wanted to, just felt like they're too far behind. But
Yeah.
for season two with the changes, they feel like, oh, now I can have a fair shot at like competing and such, because everything's sort of reset. I think that's the right move.
Mm-hmm. For sure. For sure. Um, and so do you think like everyone that has worked this whole season to get their ranks up, you think it's just like, oh, it's just gonna be reset, everyone's back on even playing field? Or I think you said something about how they're gonna take the previous rank and kind of affect this next season, or no, everything's just
Oh
reset?
no, I think that it's just they're gonna reset everything, and they're gonna take sort of like where I forgot where I read it, but it was somewhere in the official rules where they said that they were gonna just like kind of like commemorate, I guess, like kind of like your best ranking at the time during sort of the season, and use that as a way to kind of like lock in how you sort of did, and treat it as kind of a trophy or whatnot.
Mm,
Just because like when you think about it, like I think in a lot of like these sort of like video games or whatnot, the whole point behind it is like to have a fresh start and allow people to kind of like start all over again and kind of like compete. Because people have ebbs and flows. Some people start off like really strong. Some people end up starting off a little rocky. I think that just having like kind of a fresh start, but like everyone's still in it too,
mm-hmm.
because it's like fun. And as you were saying, so much has kind of changed that I don't think that there'll necessarily be any sort of like shakeup of anything. Like, oh, like things kind of change. Similar to like video game like championships, where someone sort of like wins when you restart. It's not like they have like any better. You watch out for them.
Yeah,
If
yeah,
anything, you go into the second season, you're now like, oh, like I know who to watch out for, because I know who did well or whatnot. So
yeah.
I think it's still just going to be as exciting as it was before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's gonna be interesting to see. So you know how we started in January this past year, right? This past season,
Yeah, with no rankings, we just didn't know anything
we
about
didn't
one
know
another.
anything, right? And then Silph.gg came out and created this league, and then we had Worlds in the middle of the season, pretty much. So this is the first time we're gonna have like a full season, right? It's gonna be where I'm thinking regionals is gonna be in the middle. Do you think that's gonna be near the end of the season this time?
I
It
think
should be,
they
right?
always wanted it to be the end of the season, because when you look at what they were targeting, I think they had the assumption that GoFest was going to be later, and since it came earlier, that's what they got thrown off by. I think
Yeah.
with like everything that they can do, they ideally would want it to be at the end, and they're going to try to target it
Hmm.
at the end. But I mean, like like they're gonna do the best that they can to like kind of like do go in blind, really, because
Right.
like they don't have sort of that coordination that they would like, or foresight that they would like to have.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of cool that I feel like Niantic has kind of been pushing PvP more, especially with this Team Rocket, this Pokemon Team Rocket Go event
Hmm.
coming out. It's
Mm-hmm.
going to be it's kind of pushing PvP, and I kind of like it. It's it's making everything new. It's
Yeah.
bringing more people in, a nice reset of the season. Hopefully, can draw more people into the competitive scene, and yeah, I just think it's kind of nice to see everything. And by having this Mirror Cup, it's kind of seeing how far we've come from the beginning. Uh, I think Mirror Cup is going to be a nice crescendo, I guess you could
Yeah.
say,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
to the whole
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
season to kind of get to revisit all these Pokemon, revisit all these metas, and kind of challenge us to see like how many metas we can really take on in one
Yeah.
run.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Because I remember during regionals, man, I was like pulling my hair trying to figure out both the regionals meta and I forgot what was it, the nightmare meta. Both of them going
Yeah,
on at the
yeah,
same
yeah,
time.
yeah. And you can imagine, like, if you look at like the most diverse metas I hear, I would say regionals is one of them, and also Rainbow. Like Rainbow, there's just a lot that was going on. Even though it seemed the most restricted because it was just two generations, but like with the five different sort of types, I think
That's
that
true.
you really saw a lot of different like kind of play that came out of here, and I think there's just a lot of possibilities in terms of strategy and stuff. Like I remember having talks of like what's off meta for Rainbow, and it was kind of really hard because of the fact of all the different strategies you can kind of play. You can go with like 2 waters, 3 waters. You can go to 5 waters. Like there's just
Yeah,
weird things you can kind of do.
yeah, for sure. I think yeah, like someone could host Rainbow Cup again, right? Like
Uh huh.
it's it's going to be interesting for sure to see all the different cups being held and like I'm just thinking the Sylph Arena Reddit is going to be all over the place now. It's
Yeah,
just going to
yeah,
be
yeah,
like people
yeah.
discussing one cup and then another cup and then another cup, and I'm pretty sure someone's going to come up with like somewhat of a team that you can bring into all the cups. It's gonna be
Oh God, God. Oh my God. Yeah.
it's gonna be crazy.
Yeah, I can't even imagine how the Ghost Stadia. Like, I'm hoping they archived all the old channels because it's pretty much like, oh, let's just bring all those back because like they're
Yeah,
all the different spreadsheets and stuff. Like, they might need updating, but I still think there's a lot of relevant stuff that's kind of like there. They just need some kind of tweaks. Just like, like we thought we had Jungle figured out, Charm Drop, and then we're like, all right, let's go and figure out what we kind of need to
yeah,
do now.
yeah. Even in regionals, like the meta
Oh, what?
totally
Yeah, with
shifted.
Proto Pass. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Probo no, but like what was it? You had what's the evolution of vaults? The male evolution of vaults.
Oh, Gallade, look, Gallade
Gallade
coming in.
became meta. Lugia
Lugia, like, yeah, if people are using Lugia, yeah, no, for sure.
like even that changed. Now the meta, people are gonna be going off of the newest meta from the
Mm-hmm.
very beginning. So it's gonna be interesting. Now we do have we're still in Jungle Cup, so there's still gonna be a lot of discussion and
Mm-hmm.
things around this new Mirror Cup, but it's going to be oh, man, I just can't even imagine how much preparation is gonna have to go into uh, this this next month. It's gonna be crazy.
Yeah, I mean, if anything, we'll work backwards, and it's like, well, like Jungle's going to be kind of like the freshest, but
I
I
don't think
think
anyone's
because
gonna be holding another Jungle
yeah,
Cup.
yeah, because no one wants to do it because it's all about like difference and stuff. So that's
Yeah,
why, like, like the biggest things I think are going to be replays of the older ones, especially, there's always some folks saying like, oh, I missed this cup. I'd like to kind of be able to do sort of that cup again. So
yeah. So I think in the El Cerrito Discord they were talking about how Gardevoir is with
oh
Charm is
yeah,
ridiculous in
uh
Twilight
huh.
now. It's 91% win rate. That's so ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah, like both like, and also like you can imagine like Nightmare, which is kind of like Twilight V2. That also kind of gets shaken up, but seems
Yeah.
like no one wants to revisit that at all.
Yeah, I personally did terribly in my Nightmare Cup, and I don't want to touch that with a 6-foot stick.
So you're saying if a Nightmare Cup shows up in the Bay, like let's say it's like well, actually it won't be El Cerrito because no one wants to do it El Cerrito.
Yeah, but if a Nightmare Cup shows up, I'm not gonna participate in that one. I'm probably gonna just go to San Francisco, Tri
Yeah,
Valley,
yeah,
Berkeley.
yeah,
Like, I guess we're kind of spoiled, right? We're kind of spoiled with so many active communities
yeah.
in the Bay Area. It's gonna be interesting to see some of these smaller or more rural areas trying to hold like a cup and making
Hmm.
sure like everyone feels included, because these smaller communities can only hold so many cups, right? And sometimes they already have a hard time
Yeah.
getting a full 8 people or 12 people, and having so many options and they can only pick one might like piss off some people.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, yeah.
Like
Yeah,
if
like I was thinking about it as in like, oh, like, it gives the opportunity to kind of like hold a bunch, but like if you're looking, that's like kind of like on the grand scale of coordinating across communities. If you're talking about just kind of like one isolated community, yeah, I can imagine if you're already having trouble there, now you have to get people to choose, and they're already kind of like no, I don't want to do this. Like,
yeah,
yeah, I could see that being rough.
yeah, it'll be interesting to see how. Yeah, like I said, I think we're kind of spoiled having so many options to participate in tournaments. These rural communities are going to have more tougher options. Oh, but another thing is these the remote tournaments. How
Oh yeah, oh god, like yeah, yeah,
who's gonna decide that?
yeah. I mean, if anything, I can sort of see those as like they've always been great for like kind of like giving you metas outside of like your usual kind of community and practices. I can sort of see that as ways to kind of like even try out like just like different like use that to kind of branch out for in terms of diversity and have like different cups like sort of held through there. Yeah, maybe like with the multiples and stuff, like you can kind of use that as a way to kind of like test grounds even further.
Maybe we'll see. We'll see. But is there anything that you wanted to anything interesting within that you wanted to say about the Mirror Cup? Any closing thoughts? I'm still editing my Jungle Cup video, so pretty much I just wanted to get on and discuss with you about like
Oh.
this Mirror Cup. I know I wanted to talk about it because there's a lot of changes
Mm-hmm.
from like we mentioned it earlier about the earlier cups, how things have changed since then. New Pokemon, new moves, and hell, even if the new battle mechanic, like you mentioned earlier, is going to drop before this next cup, it's just going to, like, so many things are going to change. Like, did you
Mm-hmm.
see the Gengar attack charge move animation? It's like all over the place and you're just swiping
Oh
left and
yeah, yeah.
right.
Like I saw that thing, and what's interesting is the it says that like all the charge moves are going to be like kind of specific about like the type of the move.
Yeah.
However, I remember seeing like the original video how X Scissor was the X with like that was like bug, right? Which kind of makes sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if that's kind of like the case, like does that mean like every single bug moves the X? Does it mean like the lineup?
Yeah.
Like it'll be interesting to see how that kind of like plays out, and just like again, like there's going to be like because of the fact that like that's going to be a brand new mechanic that's going to affect everything.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's going to be like new strategies that are going to kind of come out in terms of like just like ways to bait or throw off people, to like because of the fact that patterns are a little more guessable and stuff that I can see that, and just like how like that's going to equate to like like the 3 ring damage or whatnot. I think right now everyone takes like okay, you're definitely going to do like 3 rings unless you're trying to like undertap to kind of help farm. That's going to be interesting to see how what strategies develop around that and change some cups that we right now we think is kind of stale, which I think right now you're looking at like say like Tempest or Kingdom seem like the ones that are least effective, even though there have been a lot of changes there.
For sure. I'm kind of interested. I know we talked about this a little earlier, but Jay Devon brought up like season 1 badge. Like you mentioned how in other video games, right? Like at end of a season, everything gets reset, but you get like a trophy or something like that. So do you think everyone that got to an ace trainer would get an ace trainer badge for season 1?
Yeah. I think so. I think that's like the idea of like, oh, like let's say you just made challenger, you fall down from challenger or ace or whatnot. Like I think they're not gonna necessarily maybe capture your rank, but like kind of the title that you kind of got. So I can imagine like like if you made it to ace, right, like you'll get something that's like an ace card. Yeah, I think that's gonna be what's going on.
I think that's how they're going to kind of commemorate like
Mm-hmm.
the hard work you put in each season, right? Otherwise, you're just kind of you feel like
right, and I would, and that's probably gonna. You're probably gonna get something for like the championship winners. I wouldn't be surprised if they got a little badge say, "Oh, we won season 1 champions." On top of that, just because a lot of those were like there's challengers that are there, which makes it so that despite the fact that people are like, "Oh wow, aces, it definitely is hard to kind of get out there. It's like pretty cool to show that, hey, look, like you don't have to be like ace. You can still kind of be like a challenger. Like I think that the European Championship was the most interesting thing because like Raging Taz, like his story, if you watch his video, was that he like won through the open qualifiers. Like he had a buddy who was going to.
Yeah.
He's like level 37 too, so it's like,
Yeah.
dude, like you know, like it really shows that like as long as you're interested and you want to play, you have a shot at becoming a champion, which I
Yeah.
think is really cool.
For sure. And I definitely know a lot of people that joined PvP like midway through the season. So because they joined midway through the season, they had like very low rankings. Like I've gotten beaten by rivals. I've gotten beaten by trainers
Yeah.
just because they joined later. And I feel like with all these new people joining, I think I think this reset's kind of needed. So, with that being said, do you think they're going to start the new season right away?
See, like I've thought about that too, because it's like one, it's like, well, shoot, what am I gonna do in like the whatever, however many months? Like, what do I do? Like, I don't know what I'm gonna hunt after or whatnot. But at the same time, you know, like I can see that, you know, the Silk Road seems to have just been like on a crazy struggle, like month after month, championship after championship. Like they're holding it together and as like kind of a volunteer organization, and you know, I could see them just being able to just take 2-3 months or however long they want just to like get their stuff kind of like settled and stuff like that too. So I can see it kind of like both ways.
Yeah, I think taking a month or two off and really thinking about planning ahead so that they can drop these cups on time and without like, you know, tons of Reddit posts. I think having everything locked and loaded, ready to go, is going to make these tournaments and make these announcements much more smooth. Rather than like when Sylph.gg first came out, they were kind of like struggling to get everything put together, right? I think like a month or two off is definitely going to help the Sylph.gg group really organize for this next season. And I think this next season is going to be bigger and better than the last one.
Yeah, like there's still ideas of like they originally said, oh, pink Pokemon only, and I think Drumps have even said like, yeah, that's not ruled out yet. Like you know, we're used to types and stuff, but I can totally see like in like season 2 they throw sort of like other restrictions are like in, and you know I can see that with some extra time they can prepare like and find metas that are kind of around that are like kind of balanced and such. So I think it's going to be exciting to see kind of regardless of whether they take time off or what they're going to do. Like there'll be things for us to do, especially because if they drop sort of this mini game, then that gives us a month or two to kind of figure out like, okay, like what do we do? What do we do now, right? Like instead of like being like, oh shoot, we need to compete for this cup and figure out like this game. It's like, okay, great. Now we have some time to kind of figure out what this is like, and you know, give them time to like, you know, like prepare for stuff so that we have sort of like strategies and such to deal with it.
For sure. But yeah, I think we kind of covered a lot of stuff about the Mirror Cup. There's tons of resources. It's so variety that it's kind of hard to really discuss it, right? Like you have to discuss each individual cup, talk about what's changed since that cup was initially like announced in its respective month, and what has come out after it. Other than the Jungle Cup is the Jungle Cup. But yeah, it's gonna be crazy. This next month is going to be full of. I feel like it's gonna be full of upsets and and just like interesting Pokemon choices. I think everyone's just gonna have fun. I think it's definitely gonna be fun though. Like
I can also imagine how like we saw what happened with Charm affecting a single cup, right? Like if Niantic releases any new move or mechanic or stuff, like I can see how that just totally disrupts like a lot of different cups that have kind of been like that. Like if they come up with something that's like, oh my god, all of a sudden like in this cup, this Pokemon is just super broken. It's like whoa, like you know, like that's a lot of like damage control all of a sudden.
But Sylph does say that they will occasionally ban certain Pokemon if they feel like it's super overwhelming, right? Like I don't think Wigglytuff is super overwhelming in the jungle. Like it changes things, but I don't think it necessarily completely shifted the meta. It more just like moved it a little bit.
Yeah, I think it balanced it a lot out because a lot of people were like, "Oh, let's ban Vig or whatnot," but
Mhm.
Wiggly came and I think it kind of evened out like like what was going on there. So in the end, I think that it still was good that especially because yeah, I think it would have been terrible if it was like, "Oh yeah, now you have to use Wigglytuff." It was like
Yeah.
it's like kind of like the dominating force. If anything, it just gave you something like, "Hey, watch out for
Hmm.
this."
Hmm. Yeah. Team Rocket Academy just said as well. Wigglytuff equalized Vigoroth. It kind of. I mean, I don't know. It definitely brought in another Pokemon to counter Vigoroth, right? Like,
Yeah,
so
and Noctowl, and I think it just like it equalized the cup. I like the reflecting back. I think it was like a good sort of addition.
that's good. That's good. All right. Any closing thoughts? I'm about to head off.
I'm just kind of excited to see like kind of what comes out of here. Like I think that like these metas are going to be super exciting just to visit with what we know now, and we know that we're like right on the heels of like like Shadow Pokemon, Purified Pokemon, new mini
Oh yeah,
games.
I
Like
wanted
it,
to ask you about that. I haven't really done my research on Shadow Pokemon, so what's the deal with that? Like, do they not have a
um,
typing? Like, what's going on?
I think in terms of mechanics, they take the same typing that's like there. I think that there's an effect in terms of how much CP it takes. So Shadow Pokemon, I think the idea is that they're more powerful, but they take more CP to power up. So I think translated to Pogo, I think that's what that'll end up being is that it might be higher level and take more Stardust to power up, which could be good and bad for like a Great League because depending on the Pokemon that you can kind of have, because only a subset of them can be Shadow Pokemon. I think the other thing that they're adding in is like they have the abilities to uniquely have, I think, Return and Frustration, which have traditionally in the video games been like friendship sort of based, and they're kind of normal types. So the additions of that, I can totally see it being very interesting on things that are like like normal type, just kind of giving like solid damage that's like there.
Mhm.
But it's unclear like whether or not Shadow Pokemon will have different sort of move sets. Like,
Mhm.
will they be treated as like kind of like how Armored Mewtwo is like kind of like different, and also just how you can obtain them and like the Stardust costs that are there.
So, Team Rocket Academy said once purified, it seems they don't have a Stardust cost, and also they possibly get a return charge move. What?
Mm-hmm,
So
mm-hmm.
so what's the return charge move? Is that just a move?
Uh, so that's traditionally in the video games been like a normal type move that is based off friendship. If I think about like how that's going to reflect in like PvP, I can see that as maybe being something like kind of like body slam, like just like a good
Okay.
normal move and things. So it's just going to be a normal type move. I don't see it having any stat changes or anything.
Mhm.
So what that can affect is just making probably more like normal types like maybe more balanced. Like I'm thinking about like maybe cast form, Munchlax, maybe something else might be kind of useful because normal types in general, I don't think I've ever across the meta we've ever had a Pokemon where it's like, oh, like it has this normal move and it kind of works out, other than last resort
Yeah.
Umbreon. So I can imagine that it could be like opening up like the waves to like give a Pokemon like another sort of like kind of neutral sort of damage
Yeah.
thing.
A coverage move of sort.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm interested to see. So, from what I read, you get a shadow Pokemon if you defeat a Team Rocket Go grunt and they
Mm-hmm.
leave behind a shadow Pokemon. I wonder, like, I guess, like, I haven't done any research on this next event, but
I mean, there isn't any really information out either,
okay.
so it's like this is all just kind of speculation
Uh huh.
anyway. So
Just based on the coding, right?
yeah, like off the game master,
Uh
what
huh.
people have kind of like seen from like sort of the advertising. So it's all still kind of up in the air in terms of like because we've seen screenshots be off, right? We saw Dragonite raids, which didn't come until sort of later. So
Yeah.
we're seeing screenshots of Stardust costs and stuff that which can kind of be off.
Yeah. Yeah. I think. I guess we'll just have to find out. I think they're going to announce it sometime this coming weekend.
Oh
Like
yeah,
after, I think at the end of SDCC or something like that.
okay,
They're going.
uh-huh.
This is just speculation, of course, but
Sure.
it makes sense that it kind of coincides with a big event like SDCC, right? So, um, yeah, that's pretty much it. We discussed Mirror Cup. We didn't get super deep into it because, well, it's just too much of a rabbit hole to go down.
And a
But
lot can change too. I think we really need to see the Team Rocket thing and like the mini games come through before we get a better
that's
sense.
true. how tournaments gonna be held. Are we gonna be held like people facing away from each
Yeah,
other
yeah,
now?
right,
Otherwise, you
right,
can
right.
tell how you're
Yeah, yeah.
swiping.
Mm-hmm.
It's gonna be interesting for sure. But thank you so much for joining me discussing this drop of the Mirror Cup. I think I look forward to battling you. We'll probably run into each other again anyway. So,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, thanks for joining.
All right. Thanks a lot.
All right, so